We spoke just a few moments ago about what we were expecting. 7-2 seems to have been the consensus. A little bit maybe more dovish in terms of the vote split.
That looks like it, Guy. Absolutely, yeah. As you say, the hold was widely expected, but all the focus, as your last guest was also saying, was on whether the breakdown was going to be 7 members of the Monetary Policy Committee voting to hold and 2 for a quarter-point cut. But in fact, we've got 3 for a quarter-point cut, and it looks like the addition to that one is Dave Ramsden, who's sort of on the more dovish side of the bank anyway, but definitely was not one of those that was potentially projected in the 7-2 split. So, there's obviously a lot of headlines crossing the terminal as we speak. We're seeing Governor Bailey, that they're obviously monitoring how far the economic slowdown feeds into inflation. We've had some weak numbers on GDP recently, and the bank's being vigilant, as you probably would expect, on Middle East developments and what the impact of anything that has happened or is still to happen might have on energy prices as well, because all of that feeds into CPI and all of that feeds into their coming decisions.
Adam, the way the market's interpreting this is that August is a done deal. The market's now pricing in an 80% probability that we see a rate cut from the Bank of England in August. But given the fact that we do have that geopolitical risk, given the fact that we do have the potential for energy prices to go sharply higher, is the bank running a risk of locking itself into that decision? How locked in is it right now? 80% sounds like a very high number, and it'd be hard to fight the market with those kinds of figures.
Well, we've already seen this morning. The Norges Bank is not the Bank of England. They're different beasts, of course. But we've seen one surprise there. These things can happen. The markets. Andrew Bailey's come out potentially. I certainly recall in times before when Andrew Bailey's come out and said the markets will do what the markets will guide in certain ways, but the bank still has the agency, of course, to make those decisions. So there's a lot still to come, as you say. Perhaps sort of standing pat, as it were, and thinking about being careful and watching all the data over the next few months is exactly what the bank says it's going to be doing. We will see. It seems like we may well know in the next few days or so what the mood music is from Washington, whether the US gets involved in that ongoing conflict in the Middle East, and indeed what happens with tariffs before the BOE meets next. So there's so many uncertainties, and as we've all seen in the past, market bets and traders' expectations can change pretty swiftly.
What does this mean in terms of the other factors we're watching in the UK? What do we need to worry about here? We've got a growth slowdown, but we've got a sticky inflation. Increasingly, it feels like the bank is focusing on that growth slowdown, which feels maybe a little different to what the Fed is delivering right now, where it's concerned maybe about the upside to inflation. Is the bank taking a different path here? Is the growth risk now the bigger risk?
Growth is the main conversation in the UK. If you listen to obviously, the bank is independent and charts its own course. But if you listen to the narrative out of the Labour government, all they want to talk about is growth. They have to talk about it when it's anemic, and they very much want to talk about it if and when it becomes stronger. They're pushing for investment, and they're pushing for an increase in the underlying factors that might fuel growth, and that's what we're all looking out for. So that's the sort of the dominant narrative that swirls around the Bank of England in the UK, and the mood music and the wider narrative in the US slightly different. They've had obviously a much stronger performing economy over recent years, now being sort of beset with all of those questions around what might happen when the full tariff suite comes into play, if it does, in the US. But yeah, definitely growth central to the mindset of policymakers in the UK.